Hello and welcome to this FL Studio tutorial. My name is Bruno G, and in this tutorial, I'll show you a few tips to create effective and compelling melodies for house and electronic dance music in general. Let's listen to the final result. Okay. First of all, if you don't know music theory in deep, stick to a single key. There is absolutely no need to change the key of your compositions from song to song. I myself like to use the key of G major, which has only one accident, or if you prefer, a black key, which is F sharp. However, the secret for creating an effective melody relies on its relation to the underlying bass line. It's simple as that. With that said, let's jump right into the piano roll and come up with a simple bass line for the coming melody. The current project is set to 8 bars long, and I have laid a standard dance pattern to provide a bass beat for the track. Let's go to the Channels menu, grab an instance of the GMS plugin, and drag it to the step sequencer. Now, let's change the sound preset to Analog Bass 1 TE. Then, right-click the Instruments button to open the piano roll. We'll use a standard chord progression, known as 6-4-1-5. So, we'll start throwing 4 E5 notes in the first bar, but we'll skip the first position, and place the notes in between the kicks. This will provide a very soothing counter-tempo feel to the song. Then, Control-Select, and copy these 4 notes to the C position below. Next, do the same thing for the upper G position. And finally, same thing for the lower D position. Here's a great tip. In dance music, it's very common to double the notes, to either the lowest, or the highest octave. So, we'll copy all of them, and drag it to the first octave below. Let's take a listen at what we have so far. Not bad at all. Notice how this sequence provides interesting interval changes, and great resolution for a looping pattern. Okay, now that we have a solid underlying bass line, it's time to create our melody. From the Channels menu, let's add an instance of the Harmor plugin. From the Sound Preset list, under the Synthesizer section, grab the patch named over the top. Next, right-click on the Channel button to open the piano roll. One of the key elements in dance music is the tempo variation between the melody and its underlying harmonic bed. This technique allows us to create very simple looping patterns, and yet, maintaining a musical interest for the listener's experience. We'll accomplish that by adding a triplet feel to the composition. In other words, even though the song tempo is divided in 4th beats, we'll throw 6 notes per bar. The first underlying note is in E, so let's start placing 3 notes on E5. Notice how the second note is offset and splits right on top of the second beat. We still have room on top of the underlying E bass note. So, let's copy these 3 notes to the G above, which is the third of the E minor chord. In this pattern, we have a variation of 2 melodic notes for each underlying bass note. On the next beat, we have a bass line in C. We can copy all the 6 notes, and rearrange them accordingly. First, we'll place the first 3 notes on C5, which is the root of the chord. Now, let's create a more interesting change, by placing the remaining notes on B5, which is the major 7 of the chord. A half-tone note variation gives a more dramatic feel to the melody. At this point, let's put this portion of the song in loop, and take a listen to check the results so far. Pay pay attention to the tension generated by the opposition between the melody notes and the underlying bass. In addition to that, notice the range difference among the melody notes themselves. The bottom line here is, we can play around with the note choices, both on the bass line and the melody, as long as we respect their harmonic relationship to the hosting key, which is G major. Let's move on with our melody line. Now we can copy all the notes, and paste them all the way to the end. The next underlying bass note is actually G, so we'll keep the root aspect of it, and move the first 3 notes up to G5. For the remaining notes, we'll use the 9th interval, and raise them to A5. As you can see, for each block of notes, we used a different interval range, but most importantly, always respecting the harmonic rules of G major. Let's tackle the last underlying bass note, which is D, and be done with it. This time, we'll start with the third of the D major chord, which is F sharp. And for the last 3 notes, we'll switch to the root, D. All done, let's take a final listen. Okay. Not bad at all. As you can hear, it is possible to generate a solid melody line, with just a few notes from the same key, as long as we stay true to some basic principles. I see you on the next FL Studio tutorial.